Growing up, I never got to go to summer camp. Mostly, it was because my family didn't have the money. I remember one year asking if I could go, but that idea was quickly shot down. My parents were just trying to get by. Even so, I was lucky enough to join a few sports camps during the summer. They were kind of like regular camps, but you mainly focused on one activity. For me, it was basketball. The camp only lasted a week each summer, but during that time we practiced drills, played games, ate meals, made friends, and just enjoyed ourselves. After finishing school, my life went in a direction I hadn't imagined. I started coaching basketball at a local high school and teaching younger kids the basics of the game. After my first season of coaching went well, I decided to see if the town would be interested in a basketball camp during the summer. The response blew me away. So, before the school year ended, I found a gym I could rent and made plans to hold a camp for students between 4th and 10th grade. Spots would be filled on a first-come, first-served basis, and once it was full, that was it. The camp would run from Monday to Saturday and include overnight stays. To my surprise and excitement, every spot was claimed in just a few days. I was beyond excited to begin this journey. On the last day of registration, as we were packing up our supplies, an angry man stormed into the gym yelling, "Hey, don't pack up yet. I'm signing up my son right now." I was immediately annoyed by how aggressive he sounded, but I calmly responded, "I'm sorry, sir. All spots are taken. I wish I could accept more kids, but we're at full capacity." He wasn't having it. He started shouting and kicking over chairs. I tried to get him to settle down so I could explain why I couldn't take more campers, but he kept yelling. I honestly felt bad for the kid. Luckily, he hadn't brought the boy with him, so he didn't witness any of it. I get it, though. Parents want the best for their kids, and sometimes when they can't give them something, it really hurts. After a few minutes of ranting, he finally stormed off, shouting that I hadn't seen the last of him and that I'd regret this. As a coach, I've had more than a few upset parents say things like that. I've learned not to take it too seriously. They're usually just speaking out of frustration. So I brushed it off and focused on the camp ahead. When camp finally started, I ran it similar to the ones I attended as a kid: drills, scrimmages, downtime, and some fun team-building games. My coaching team and I worked the kids hard on day one. That night, most of them were fast asleep by 8 or 9 p.m. It made things easier for us, no need to quiet down a bunch of teenagers. This pattern kept up for the first few days. By Wednesday, only one kid asked to go home. After a nice talk, we convinced him to stay. That same night, around 11 p.m., I was making my usual rounds to make sure everyone was in bed. The camp was set up in an old school building no longer used for classes. It had been fixed up and was in good shape. To help you picture it better, each group of campers slept in converted classrooms. Before the camp started, we turned them into cozy living quarters. They were like indoor cabins you'd find at a traditional summer camp. After checking the sleeping areas and making sure all the kids were resting or at least staying quiet in bed, I walked toward the gym. To get there, you had to pass through a long hallway and then go through the cafeteria, which still had a stage at one end, left over from the days when students performed plays and concerts there. As I entered the cafeteria, I heard noise coming from the stage area. I called out, telling whoever was up there to come down. I figured it was just one of the kids being sneaky or maybe a coach checking something. I called out again, no reply, but I was sure someone was up there because I clearly heard footsteps. Couldn't have been anything else. With my coach voice on, I shouted, "Okay, you had your chance, I'm coming up." I stepped up onto the stage and flashed my light around. I didn't see anyone, and the sound had stopped. Just as I was about to leave, a low, angry voice came from behind one of the curtains. "Told you you'd regret it," the voice said. I swung my light toward the sound, and from the darkness, someone rushed at me. It didn't take me long to recognize him. It was the same angry man from the registration day. Before I could react, he tackled me and started throwing punches. I tried to shield myself, but he was completely unhinged. Luckily, one of the other coaches heard the noise and ran in. He managed to pull the man off me. The guy was still out of control, flailing around. We held him down and called the police. Thank goodness they got there fast and took him away. But believe it or not, this is where it gets even more bizarre. Turns out, the man's son was already in the camp. The boy's mom had full custody, and the father wasn't even supposed to be involved. She had apparently told him multiple times that she had signed their son up. But for some reason, something about it being a father's role to sign his child up, he got furious. The man wasn't mentally stable either, which became pretty clear. The mother and the police explained the situation to us afterward. I had to spend the next day calling parents to let them know what happened and to reassure them their kids were safe. That was the only time anything like that ever happened. And thankfully, it didn't ruin the camp. It was terrifying in the moment, and every year before camp starts, I still think about that guy. I have no idea how he got in. All the doors were locked. There weren't any windows big enough to crawl through. The only thing that makes sense is that he showed up on the first day and somehow hid in the school the entire time. Just thinking about that gives me chills. It's a scary reminder that no matter how safe you feel, you never really know who might be lurking. I didn't really understand how weird this whole story was until recently, when I told my girlfriend and her friends what went down. I guess I just don't notice stuff sometimes. I'm terrible at reading people. My girlfriend had been dropping hints and trying to flirt with me for weeks, and I completely missed it. So yeah, I'm not great at reading between the lines. Anyway, this happened a long time ago when I was either 14 or 15. I can't remember exactly. I had signed up for a Christian summer camp. It wasn't super religious or anything. It just had the Christian name slapped on it to draw people in. Where I lived, you were either part of a church or you weren't part of anything. My folks figured sending me off to camp would help me open up and make some new friends since I was pretty awkward back then. And I mean, they were halfway right. On the first day, I met this kid named Casey. He had on a Spider-Man shirt and I was wearing a Spider-Man hat. We cracked up over it and clicked right away. Casey was a lot like me, shy, dry sense of humor, and completely obsessed with comic books. We spent hours just talking about comics and what kind of stuff we hoped would show up in movies someday. This was way before superhero films really exploded. I think the first Iron Man had just hit theaters right before camp started. That shared obsession with superheroes made us kind of different from everyone else. While most kids split off into big groups to do all the camp activities, Casey and I usually hung back. We both weren't fans of swimming, so whenever there was pool time, we just skipped it. One day, Casey brought this stack of notebook paper and showed me his sketches. The dude was insanely talented. He told me I should jot down some superhero ideas and he'd draw them out. I thought that was the coolest idea ever. Before long, I kind of forgot I was even at camp. Everything else sort of faded into the background. It was just me and my new best friend. We'd stay up late working on our comic ideas, sometimes into the early morning hours. One night, a counselor was leading a nighttime hike and saw us with our flashlights drawing and writing. He wasn't too mad since we weren't doing anything wrong, but he still told us to pack it up and get to sleep. We weren't the rule-breaking types, so we listened. But the next night, we stayed up again. This time, we were more careful. We said if we heard anything outside, we'd quickly turn off our lights and lay low. At some point that night, we heard footsteps outside. We switched off our flashlights and jumped in our beds. The steps got closer, slow and steady, and something about them just felt off. At first, I figured it might be a counselor trying to catch someone staying up past lights out, but it didn't feel right. Casey and I were on the far end of the cabin, maybe 15 or 20 feet from the door. Then the doorknob started rattling, but no one came in. We made eye contact and Casey silently mouthed, "What's going on?" I shrugged, I had no clue. Then Casey got up and carefully moved toward the door. He whispered, "Hey, who is it?" No answer at first. He looked back at me, confused. Then we heard a voice whisper, "Hey, it's Mike. Just open up real quick." That threw us. The only Mike we knew was asleep in our room with us. Casey quietly replied, "The only Mike we know is right here." The voice went quiet. Then the doorknob shook again, harder this time. It was like whoever it was really wanted in. A few seconds later, the voice said again, "Come on, man, just open up. Just making sure everyone's all right." Casey did the smart thing and said, "Sorry, dude. Only the staff have keys. You'll have to ask them." He turned around to head back to bed. But then the person outside started forcing themselves at the door. Not just trying the knob anymore, they were actually slamming into it. They did it maybe 2 or 3 times. Then it stopped. Just like that. We laid in bed, dead silent, not sure what the heck just happened. After a few minutes, we heard the doorknob rattle one last time, and then footsteps slowly moved away from our cabin. That was it. The next morning, a bunch of the staff were talking quietly among themselves. They looked kind of shaken. We didn't say anything because we figured it was probably a dumb prank, and we didn't want to get in trouble for staying up past curfew. Camp went on like normal, but we noticed that the staff started staying up all night. It was like someone was always keeping watch. On the last day, we finally told one of them what had happened that night. He went pale and just said something like, "Oh, probably just someone messing around. Nothing to worry about." Then he immediately walked over to another staff member and started talking in hushed tones. After camp ended and I got home, I didn't really think about it much again. That is, until the story randomly came up when I was hanging out with my girlfriend and some of her friends. I'm still super close with Casey. I even called him the night I told the story, and he backed up everything I said. My girlfriend thinks that whoever that Mike was, they probably had bad intentions. And honestly, when I look back at it, the creepy voice, the strange behavior, the way the staff acted afterward, it all lines up. Maybe it really was someone trying to do something terrible. What do you think? Was it just a camper trying to pull a prank? Or was it something a lot darker? When I was a bit younger, I was desperate to be accepted, and I'd go to great lengths to be seen as one of the popular kids. When I turned 14, my folks sent me to a summer camp. I was genuinely excited about the chance to meet new people and, hopefully, show everyone how cool I really was, or at least try to convince myself. The day I arrived, I immediately found myself drawn to a group that seemed fun. There were 4 guys standing near one of the wooden cabins. They all had messy hair and dressed like they were into skateboarding, which at the time seemed like what all the trendy kids were into, at least in my head. The leader of the group, I think leader fits here, was a guy named Tyler. He wore a flipped-around Chicago Bears cap and was cracking up the others with some wild story. As I walked up, I forced a laugh at his joke, even though I didn't understand a word of it. Just pretending I got it was enough to be included. A few days in, it became clear that I'd picked the right crowd. The younger campers looked up to them, and the ones our age always laughed at our jokes. We became the funny crew, though really we were just getting in trouble nonstop for goofing off. This was back when shows like Viva La Bam and Wild Boys were everywhere, so we thought pulling risky stunts made us cool. Tyler even dared one of the campers, a kid named Ben, to leap off the roof of one of the cabins onto a nearby tree. He swore he'd done it loads of times, but when Ben did it, the branch broke and he took a nasty fall. I'm pretty sure his wrist was broken. Tyler didn't get in any trouble, and Ben had to go home. That was the first time I realized Tyler maybe wasn't the hero he acted like. As the days passed, I started getting annoyed with Tyler. Maybe I was growing up a bit, or maybe I finally saw through the whole act. Either way, I wasn't into it anymore. At first, everyone thought Tyler was hilarious, but slowly people started to roll their eyes at his jokes. Like me, they were getting sick of his obsession with pranks, especially on the kids he decided weren't cool. One night, we were all hanging out in the bunkhouse, telling creepy stories and swapping tales from where we grew up. That's when Tyler had to top everyone, of course. With this smug look, he goes, "You all think those are scary? Just wait till you hear mine." He said, "I've been holding on to this one for a while, but tonight feels right." I mentioned before that my cousin came to this camp when he was my age. He told me there's this rundown hut deep in the woods, off the paths we usually hike. The story goes that place is seriously haunted. Like, for real. He went on about how years ago the former camp caretaker used the hut to do awful things to people. And when he was finally caught, he died trying to run from the police. Rumor had it his ghost still lingers around there. And if you go on a quiet night like this, you might hear the voices of the people he hurt. I didn't buy it, not even a little. I'm not into ghost stuff. but the rest of the guys looked like they were about to freak out. I just sighed and let Tyler keep going. He claimed that since I didn't believe him, he'd tell me how to get there and that we should go check it out. Right away, the group started to protest. I was the first to say, "No chance, man. Not 'cause I'm scared of your dumb ghost, but I don't want to get booted from camp." Tyler laughed and called me something I'm not repeating here. He had this annoying way of talking people into stuff. After arguing for a while, everyone agreed to go, except for me. I got labeled the chicken of the group. Then he said, "If ghosts don't scare you, then why not be the one to go inside? If you do it, we'll have to tell everyone how brave you are." Yeah. He really said that. And yeah, it actually worked. Mostly out of irritation, I finally gave in. We snuck into the woods once the lights from camp disappeared behind us. We flipped on our flashlights and pushed through trees where there wasn't even a real path. I don't know how far we walked, but eventually, I saw it, this rotting wooden shack hidden by overgrowth. Some of the guys whispered stuff like, "No way," and "Whoa." And part of me started wondering if Tyler had actually told the truth. He pushed me to check it out. I didn't want to. I kept thinking about his story. Even though I don't believe in spirits, something about standing in front of this place, in the middle of the night after hearing all that, I nearly wet myself. The group started heckling me, "Where's that bravery now?" and other dumb stuff. I figured I'd come this far, might as well get it over with. I stepped forward and went in. Inside, it was bigger than a shack, more like a tiny cabin, maybe the size of a studio flat. The place was trashed. As I walked around with my flashlight, something weird caught my eye. A beer bottle. No joke, it was still cold. There was condensation on the wood floor under it. Farther in, I spotted a plastic grocery bag, and sticking out of it was a half-eaten bag of chips. My brain couldn't even make sense of what I was seeing. I was scared, yes, but also kind of fascinated. At the very back was a small room, so I went in, shining my light around. Then I saw her, a woman, standing in the corner. I swear to you, I felt my body go cold, like physically cold. I felt sick. She raised her hands a little and said in this trembling voice, "Don't say anything." She didn't seem scared, more like angry, like she was warning me. Tyler shouted from outside, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. The woman shook her head, silently telling me not to. After a pause, I ignored my instincts and screamed, "Run!" Then I bolted out of there. I heard her yell something behind me but didn't look back. I could hear her stumbling through the mess inside, maybe chasing me. I ran out screaming that someone was inside and we had to leave. At first, the others looked at me like I was joking. Then she appeared in the doorway, yelling something none of us could understand. We all took off running like crazy. By the time we got back, some of the camp staff were waiting for us, half asleep and furious. I tried to explain, told them someone was living in the woods. They didn't believe us and said they'd be calling our parents the next morning. I was actually relieved. I wanted to go home. That morning, the camp director came into our cabin and sat us down. He said they went out to that shack early and saw what we described. Footprints, trash, the works. And they weren't sure who that woman was, or if more people were out there. To be safe, they ended the whole session early and sent everyone home. I'm grateful I got out of there okay. It messed with my head for a long time, but I've mostly made peace with it. I never talked to those guys again, not even Tyler, though they said what I did was hardcore. I think it was just dumb luck I didn't get hurt. Let this be a warning. Watch who you call your friends. They might just walk you into something you can't walk back out of. Back when I was in my third year of university, one of my mentors suggested I spend the summer volunteering at a camp for teenagers. I wasn't really into the whole camp scene, but it was one of those things that would look solid on a resume, especially with the type of program I was studying. So before the semester ended, I looked into options near where I grew up and came across a camp about 45 minutes from home that was hiring counselors. I didn't waste time, applied, had a phone interview with a guy named Rick, and got the job. The camp started right after Independence Day and ran through most of August. Over those weeks, there would be multiple rounds of different kids attending. On July 6th, the day before the campers arrived, I drove out to meet Rick, the rest of the staff, and to get familiar with the campgrounds, which were pretty spread out. I got there around 10:45 a.m., and standing outside a large lodge was this tall, bearded man waving. To the left of the lodge was the parking lot, and he pointed for me to pull in there. Once I parked, I walked over to him with my hand out for a shake, and he started laughing with a cheerful southern drawl. "Nah, we're huggers here," he said. "I'm Rick. You must be Kayla." Normally being hugged by someone I didn't know would make me uncomfortable, but this guy had a vibe like a jolly uncle, except his beard was dark, not white. As we chatted, I quickly understood why everyone liked him so much. The camp had tons of positive reviews, and Rick was a huge reason for that. He gave me a map and personally walked me around to show me everything. When we reached the lake, still full of energy, he said, "I'm turning you over to my wife now. I've got a few things to handle, but she'll show you the girls' bunks. You're gonna like her." I turned and saw a graceful older woman approaching. She gave a bright wave and said in a friendly tone, "Hey there, Kayla, I'm Marie, Rick's better half. Let me show you where the girls stay, and then I'll walk you to your bunk and introduce you to the others." Walking with Marie felt just like walking with Rick. She was sweet, engaging, and easy to talk to. She pointed out each cabin and showed me which one I'd be in charge of. Every counselor was assigned one cabin of kids. After that, we headed to a large wooden building where meals and activities happened. It was the recreation hall. That's where I met the other counselors, and we all seemed to click right off the bat. I started feeling like this summer might not be so bad after all. That first night, I couldn't sleep. Counselors had their own cabins, and mine was surprisingly cozy. Each room housed 2 of us, but they were big enough to give us our own space. My roommate, Jenna, was already passed out, and I didn't wake her when I decided to go for a walk. I didn't feel sneaky or anything. Rick and Marie had both told us that the camp was our home now and we could roam freely when off duty. The place was even prettier at night. The stars were stunning, way more than I was used to seeing back home. While I wandered, I remembered I'd left my book in the car. I figured I'd grab it and read until I got tired enough to sleep. On the way to my car, I passed that big white house I saw when I first arrived. Lights were still on. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but as I walked by, I couldn't help but glance inside. I saw Rick and Marie talking to 2 men I didn't recognize. They definitely weren't camp staff. I hate judging people by looks, but these guys had a sketchy vibe. What caught me off guard even more was the way Rick and Marie were acting. They looked tense, not like their cheerful selves. I couldn't hear anything, but it seemed like Rick was arguing with them. Still, I didn't overthink it. Maybe they were relatives or old friends. Not my business, so I kept moving. I got my book and started heading back. When I was maybe 25 yards away from the house, someone called my name. I turned and saw Marie practically jogging toward me. She looked uneasy and immediately asked if I had been spying on them or trying to eavesdrop. I told her the truth, that I was just out for a walk because I couldn't sleep and went to get my book. She stared at me for a second in a way I couldn't quite describe. Felt like she didn't trust me. Then in a flat tone, she said, "All right, sweetie, head back to bed. We've got a busy day ahead." I returned to the cabin and tried to read, but that weird moment stuck with me. I eventually drifted off, and the next morning I felt fine, surprisingly refreshed. The campers showed up and camp officially kicked off. The days rolled by and I kind of forgot about that weird night. About a week in, I had another bout of insomnia. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard a noise. Thinking it might be another counselor coming or going, I stepped into the hallway. At the top of the stairs that looked down into the living room, I noticed it was still completely dark, but I could make out 2 figures rummaging through bags. The motion sensor outside gave off just enough light to see. I didn't say anything at first, assuming it was just one of us. I crept down a few steps, but as I got closer, one of the figures turned and looked right at me. It was one of the same men I'd seen that first night with Rick and Marie. His face looked gaunt, and his eyes were locked on mine. I wanted to scream, to run, but I just froze. He started coming toward me, reaching behind his back like he was grabbing something. I finally managed to shout, and the other guy yanked him back and said, "We gotta go, now!" The first man didn't stop looking at me as he backed out and vanished into the night. A moment later, a bunch of other counselors ran in and found me shaken at the bottom of the stairs. I managed to explain what had happened, though I was stammering. Someone called Rick, who showed up quickly on his four-wheeler. I explained it all again and even said, "Rick, those were the same guys I saw you with on my first night." He laughed, looking confused, and said in his usual upbeat voice, "Now hold on, sweetheart. I've got no clue what you're talking about. Don't remember talking to anyone that night, unless they work here." We went back and forth for a while. I was getting flustered until Jenna pulled me aside, clearly noticing I was on the edge. Rick eventually left, saying he'd alert the right people and that everything was under control. Later, a few of the male counselors noticed their wallets were gone. It was terrible, but thankfully not everyone got hit. The next day, I brought it up to Marie and told her about the stolen stuff. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Whatever you think is happening, you're mistaken. It'll be dealt with." That was enough for me. Since I hadn't signed any binding agreement, I decided I was done. I found Rick and told him I was leaving. He didn't argue, just apologized for the experience and let me go. I never followed up and never found out who those men were or what their connection was to Rick and Marie. I figured that legally it'd be hard to prove anything, so I left it all behind. This is the first time I've shared what happened at that summer camp, nearly 16 years ago now. I know I did the right thing by walking away. Something in my gut told me that if I stayed, I'd see those men again. I'm just glad I never did, and glad I never went back to any camp again. When I was 15, my folks forced me to go to a summer camp that was a few hours away from our small town. Yeah, you heard me right, they made me go. Back then, I had gotten involved in some after-school stuff that ended up hurting my grades and eventually landed me in a bit of trouble with the law right as the school year wrapped up. To keep tabs on me and make sure I stayed out of more trouble, my parents figured sending me off to camp would straighten things out. I hated the idea and was mad at them for it. Now, more than 10 years later, I get that they were just trying to help and weren't sure how else to handle things. This camp lasted the whole summer. It felt like a boarding school, except instead of classes, you were doing outdoor stuff and typical camp activities. You could sign up your kid for a week or the full summer, depending on what you could afford. My parents and I compromised, and we settled on me staying for 3 weeks. I was grumpy during the drive up, just thinking about how all my friends were hanging out, how I'd miss seeing the girl I liked, and worst of all, my beloved PlayStation 3 was staying home untouched. One thing that stood out right away was how few kids my age were there. Most of the campers were middle schoolers, and only a couple of us were in high school. In my cabin, there were 7 other guys, all at least around my age. Most of them were the outdoorsy kind. They were all about hiking, esmores, and everything else camp-related. I stuck out immediately. Every one of my cabin mates had been going there for years. They told me I'd grow to love the place and that my shy, grumpy attitude would fade. I didn't believe that for a second. I never liked the whole group bonding thing. That's part of why I never got into sports or anything with teams. For me, these 3 weeks were like doing time. I just needed to make it through. For the first 5 or 6 days, I kept to myself and only did what I absolutely had to. I mostly hung out in the rec hall, which was a big building in the center of camp. It had a pool table, shelves of books, and most importantly, it was quiet. Most campers were out swimming, hiking, or joining in on the stuff the camp had scheduled. Near the end of my first week, one of the guys in my cabin asked if I'd go swimming with them. Well, more like begged. I didn't care much for them or anything about the camp, but it was hot out, so I gave in and joined them. To my surprise, I actually had fun. That day was when the place stopped feeling like punishment. I was enjoying myself, something I hadn't expected at all. After that, I never really went back to hiding out in the rec room. I spent time with the guys in my cabin and even started talking to a girl named Rachel. Since we were the older kids, we ended up having a stronger connection with the counselors. I liked that they didn't treat us like little kids. They spoke to us with respect, like we were equals. It felt more like chatting with older friends than being ordered around. Before I knew it, the final weekend of my stay had come, and I wasn't ready to leave. I almost didn't want to admit it, but it was true. My parents were set to pick me up on Sunday afternoon, so the guys and I made a plan to make the most of Friday and Saturday night. Since I was considered the troublemaker of the group, I snuck out and grabbed a bunch of snacks. We packed our cabin with goodies and stayed up playing cards and goofing around. Nothing too wild. Normally, I'd be the one pushing for something crazier like sneaking out, but I didn't even feel like doing that. I just wanted to chill with my new friends. Around midnight, a few of the guys had already dozed off. The rest of us were playing blackjack using mini candy bars as poker chips. One of our cabin mates, who'd been lying in bed with his eyes open, suddenly sat straight up and shouted, "Whoa, what the heck was that?" He startled all of us. We asked what he was talking about. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the window. Then he said, "I swear I saw someone in that tree." We locked eyes, and then he jumped down and ran off. First, we laughed. We figured he was just messing with us. The windows weren't like regular ones. There was a long one that wrapped around the top edge of the cabin, just below the roof. He started to look upset, almost crying. If this was a prank, he was fully committed. One guy doubted him, saying there was no way you could see anything through those windows at night. But the first guy told him to lie on the bed and look up. He did, and well, he was right. You could see the tops of the trees. And then, in a shaky voice, he said, "I was looking for that tree again, and I think I saw a face. I know how that sounds, but I kept staring at it. It was just watching me. When I moved, it jumped down. I swear I heard it land." One of the others suggested we go check the ground under the tree for prints or anything weird. If we found anything, we'd tell the counselors. If not, we'd assume it was all in our heads. So two of us went out with him, and we didn't even get to the tree. Right beside the cabin, just slightly hidden, there was a man. We stopped cold. He heard us, looked up, and I'll never forget the look on his face, and then bolted into the woods. We ran back inside, yelling, but not loud enough to wake the counselors. For some reason, instead of alerting them right away, we tried to talk it through first and decide what to do. Out of nowhere, one of the counselors burst into the cabin, shut the door, and locked it behind him. He looked freaked out. In a loud voice, he told us to turn off the lights and get into our bunks. We tried telling him what happened, but he wasn't really listening. A few minutes later, we saw the lights from a few ranger trucks outside. The counselor rushed out to talk to them. Not long after, the other counselors were out there too. One of the rangers was a blonde lady. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the male counselor looked panicked, yelling at her. She pointed toward the woods and nodded. Then the trucks took off. The counselors stood outside for a while, talking, and then went to each cabin, telling everyone it was a false alarm and to get some sleep. We were mad and wanted answers. We asked if it had anything to do with what we saw, but they just kept telling us it was nothing. No one had been there. We didn't sleep at all that night. Saturday night wasn't any better. By Sunday morning, my parents showed up to take me home. I told them everything. They asked the camp director about it, and he told them some camper was pulling a prank, scaring the other kids. He said one of the counselors overreacted and called the rangers, but it turned out to be nothing. He told my parents not to worry, but I didn't believe it, not for a second. I saw that man's face clear as day. Even in the dark, I could tell he was at least in his early 40s. I'm still friends with the guys from that cabin, and not long ago we all caught up and talked about that night. Every single one of them remembers it exactly how I do. I don't know what happened. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. And I still don't know why the camp acted like nothing happened. Maybe they were trying to avoid bad press. Either way, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever been through, and I'll never forget that guy's face. I've always been a big fan of camps, especially summer ones, even before I ever went to one myself. Movies like Camp Chaos and The Wild Bunks got me hooked early. There's a well-known summer camp up in the Northwest that I began going to when I was around 11 or 12. A close family friend of ours worked there and managed to get my parents a reduced rate. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to swing the cost. I went back almost every summer during my teenage years, building great memories and friendships that stuck with me for a long time. Once I hit college, I had to pause the summer fun to focus on internships that were needed for my degree. I also picked up a part-time job at a neighborhood supermarket to make some real money, just to hang with friends, cover my phone bill, and other stuff like that. After finishing school, the first thing on my list was to find a new job. I had more than enough of retail and was looking to try something new. I got a couple of interviews, but none of them turned into anything solid. By the time June showed up, my parents had that same family friend over for dinner, the one who still worked at the camp. My folks mentioned I'd been job hunting, and she said, "Why not come work at the camp? They're always short-staffed, and I can put in a good word." Figured, why not? It sure beats scanning items, bagging groceries, or collecting carts in the parking lot. The interview was super casual, just a quick call where I talked about myself and what I remembered from my time as a camper. They pretty much offered me the job right then. The plan was that I'd work for 2 weeks, and then either go home for a bit or stay through the turnover week between sessions. Campers could stay between sessions too, but the main setup was a 2-week overnight program. I decided to do the first 2 weeks and take a break after that. If it went well, I'd consider staying for the turnover week to earn a bit more. The job itself was pretty simple. I wasn't a counselor. I mostly helped out in the kitchen or ran some outdoor games, basically jumping in wherever they needed an extra set of hands. I got through most of the summer without any real issues. I didn't mess anything up on the job, the kids were all easy to deal with, and there weren't any major problems. Since I wasn't a counselor, I didn't sleep in the bunks. We had our own spots to sleep, and the co-counselors and lead staff stayed with the kids. Some of the folks with jobs like mine lived close enough to go home at night. I remember this one night, probably in early August. It was crazy hot, and I just couldn't get comfortable. I tossed and turned for hours before giving up. I got up to grab some water and stepped outside to see if the night breeze would help. I eased out the main door and instantly felt better. The air was way cooler than inside. I took a few sips and looked up at the stars. That's when I noticed something from the corner of my eye, some kind of flickering near one of the cabins, like something was shaking in front of a light. I walked a bit closer and saw a figure near the door under the outdoor lamp. At first, I thought maybe it was a raccoon, or worse. I even said to myself, "Please don't be a baby bear." But it wasn't. It was a young boy. He was pointing up at the light and waving his arm up and down, still locked in that same pointing motion. "Hey, are you all right?" I whispered. He didn't answer, just kept pointing, slowly moving his hand every few seconds. "Is this your cabin?" I asked. Still nothing. Okay, let's head inside and get to bed," I told him. He followed me without a word. When I opened the cabin door, I woke the co-counselor and said, "Hey, there was a kid outside your bunk. He could have easily wandered off." He looked surprised. "How did he get out there?" I shrugged. "Not sure." He looked annoyed and said, "I'll talk to Jordan tomorrow, find out what happened." I walked away feeling a little frustrated. I didn't know every rule, but I knew they had safety training and rules in place to stop this kind of thing from happening. Clearly, something slipped through the cracks for a kid to be out alone that late. The next day flew by, and for a while I forgot all about it. But when I brought some art supplies to the main building for the kids' next project, I saw him again, the same boy. This time he was standing in the corner, facing the wall. I turned to a coworker and asked, "What's going on?" She looked over. "I don't know. He's not talking to me either." I walked over to him. "Hey buddy, remember me? Want to grab some breakfast?" No reply, but I noticed it wasn't completely silent. I could hear something like faint whispering. As I stepped closer, the sound got a bit louder. His lips were moving, eyes closed, whispering fast and low. I lightly tapped his shoulder, and suddenly he turned around with a big smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Tommy," he chirped, then skipped off toward the cafeteria. Another day went by, and I was up early as usual. I liked taking a short walk before showering, just to enjoy the calm before the daily rush. But this morning, a bunch of my coworkers were already outside, huddled up and chatting. I walked over slowly. "Wow, you're all up early." "Yeah, didn't get much sleep," one of them said. One of Jordan's campers had to be sent home overnight. Did someone have a breakdown or something? Sort of. Spooked a lot of the other kids. A few parents came to take their kids home too. It became the big story at camp for the next few days. Rumors flying around, getting wilder each time someone retold it. One thing I heard from one of the senior staff, but could never prove, was that they found weird scratch marks or carvings under the kids' bunk. They even swapped out a few boards, but that might have just been camp gossip. I haven't been back there in a long time, but every so often I think about those summers, all the fun times I had, and once in a while I remember that night, and I still wonder what really happened to that little boy. I enjoy being by myself. I landed my dream job when I was 21, and soon after, I moved out to a quiet spot near a lake to live in peace. My work is all done on a computer, so I'm able to create my designs and send them in without needing to be around people. Most folks assume I'm either sad or bitter, but the truth is I just enjoy calm and being on my own. A few years back, a family bought a big chunk of land nearby and set up a summer camp. I was beyond annoyed. I just hoped it was far enough away that I wouldn't have to hear the chaos. Unfortunately, my worst fears came true. As soon as summer kicked off, the noise began. Cheering, games, and shouting all day long, sometimes even into the night. I tried to get something done about it, but they weren't actually breaking any laws. Being a nuisance doesn't count as a crime, no matter how much I wish it did. Took a couple of years, but eventually I got used to the noise. I remember once, I had an incident with one of the staff. He was on my land without permission. I'll never forget how smug he was. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Relax, lady. I didn't realize you lived here. You're acting like the Grinch." Then he walked off laughing. After that, some of the older kids started calling me that too. I'd hear them near my house saying things like, "That's where the Grinch lives," and other smart remarks. I didn't let it bother me too much. Over time, I even kind of accepted the nickname. Eventually, I convinced the camp owner to put up bright markers along my property line. That way, everyone would know not to cross over. To his credit, he enforced it. I even heard he sent one camper home for ignoring the boundary. I don't know if that's true, but that's what people said. Took a while, but they eventually stopped bothering me. I had security cameras set up around my land, and for several years, nothing strange happened. That changed last year. Summer kicked off like usual, and I mentally prepared myself to deal with the season. One night, I got a motion alert from one of my cameras. It was way too late for campers to be out, after 3 o'clock in the morning, so I assumed it was maybe a bear or some wild animal. When I checked the footage, I was stunned. It was a group of 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, standing right at the edge of my property. They didn't cross at first, but they were pointing at my place, laughing and pushing each other around. Then one of the boys actually stepped past the line. I lost it. I grabbed an old metal walking stick I kept by the door and was about to storm out and give them a piece of my mind. But when I turned to head outside, they were gone. I wasn't sure if they had gone back to camp or come farther onto my land, but then someone knocked on my door and I froze. I slowly made my way toward the front, but before I could even peek out, I heard knocking on the back door too. I looked through the back window and saw one of the boys standing there. While I was watching him, I suddenly heard the front door open. I know I had locked it. Somehow, one of them broke the lock or picked it. I heard his cocky voice echo through the hallway. "Hey Grinchy, are you home? We just want to see you." He and the girl laughed. I hid behind the door in my back room. Then I heard another voice from the back door. "This is Grinchy's house. You think she's here?" I was terrified. Sure, they were just teenagers, but it was 3 against 1, and those 2 boys were pretty big for their age. I could hear them wandering around the house, calling for me and whistling. One even walked right into the room I was hiding in. He started going through my stuff, opening drawers and digging through things. Eventually, they left. Felt like forever. When I finally came out, I felt sick. They had stolen a bunch of things and left my home a complete disaster. I couldn't believe anyone would do something so cruel just for fun. I called the police right away, and they showed up in about half an hour. I told them what happened, but of course, I had no proof. One of the teens had messed with my computer and deleted all the security footage. I didn't know if there was a way to recover it or not. The next morning, I went straight to the camp and spoke to the owner. He basically accused me of making it all up. By then, our relationship had soured a lot. He thought I was just trying to shut down his camp again. That's exactly what he said to me. Not long after that, I listed my house for sale and moved to another peaceful, hidden spot. I don't know how creepy this story might be to you, but when you're trapped in your own house and 3 angry teenagers are sneaking around and breaking in, you tell me if you'd be scared. I get it. I'm not always the easiest person to deal with, but what they did to me, that was beyond wrong. Some people are just plain awful.